Hi there, Glocal citizens. Welcome back to the podcast that inspires a borderless mindset around manifesting a new world. I am your host, Florence Adu, coming to you from Brooklyn. I just had to say that because I haven't said it in a long time. I'm coming to you from Brooklyn, and I'm happy to be hosting a young woman that I actually met here in Brooklyn in our pre-global career days. And she's coming to us from, well, I'll let her tell you where she's coming to us from. Let's get right into her bio and the conversation. So she has more than 20 years of experience as a senior advocacy strategist in strategic communication, partnerships, and media in the development sector, specifically in strategies, branding, resource mobilization at the country and regional level in Africa and internationally. She currently leads global partnerships at the Seed Project in Senegal and is a brand experience curator. Begay Downs Thomas, welcome to the podcast.
Hello. Thank you so much for having me. I know we've been talking about this for a while, so I'm happy that it's happening.
Yes, indeed. So let's jump right in. Let's start with our first question, which is, where are you from? Where are you local? And what is your craft?
So I am from the Gambia, originally from the Gambia in West Africa. Born and raised in New York, the most beautiful city in the world. I am currently located in Senegal, which is my base, but I am global. I am a nomad, but Dakar is my base. As you beautifully said in the intro, I'm a strategic communication advocacy and partnership consultant, and I am a creator of experiences for brands.
Okay, so tell us how a woman who loves New York and finds such beauty in it has found herself living on the continent.
Well, yeah, I think all New Yorkers can relate that, if you're a New Yorker, you just love New York, and New York will always be in your heart. I just felt that as a Gambian, I was born and raised in New York, went away to do my university studies, came back to New York and worked. But I knew I always wanted to live on the continent. Not necessarily the Gambia, but I knew I wanted to live in the continent because I definitely was that first generation New Yorker with two very proud and rightfully so Gambian parents. And that upbringing always made sure that I had a strong connection back home. And as a young professional, I wanted that to happen. New York for me at that time was changing as far as, what my main attraction to it was. I was changing at the same time, and it was ready for me to pivot. And I found myself in West Africa.
Okay, so did you first land in Senegal, in Dakar, or did you try some other locations first?
No, I actually ended up landing in the Gambia. I was trying not to be in the Gambia because I felt like I knew Gambia pretty well. I was fortunate enough to visit Gambia many times throughout my life in New York from when I was like a little infant. My parents made sure that they were able to make sure that I had a connection. I know that was something that they wanted to make sure happened, and they were fortunate enough to make it happen. So I remember in 2005, I made my decision after procrastinating year after year that I was going to really move. I wanted this kind of perfect situation laid out for me where, at that time I was in my communication life at that time in New York was in a magazine publication. I was working for Condé Nast Publications, for Condé Nast Traveler and Gourmet, which was fun and sexy and very cultural, and but I was done with that. And ideally, I wanted that to be done with a nice bow tie and have a nice position in Africa set for a bow tie and just go on a straight linear path. And that was very naive and young of me. And the world doesn't really work that way. So after a while, I just decided, I'm going to travel within the continent for 3 months. I have so many people spread throughout the continent. I'm going to send them an email, let them know that January of 2006, I'll be in the continent for 3 months. Let me know when I can visit you for how long. Here's my CV. Share it with your network. And if when I'm visiting you, you have people that I can meet that like my profile, I'd love to link up with them.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah. So I thought that would be fun for 3 months. But, as we say, when your intention is clear and set, the delivery comes through. So before I left New York, I had interviews in Cape Town. I think at that time it was called Associated. the publication house associated. It was a branch off of Hearst Publication. And I had an interview with O Magazine in Cape Town. And then I also had an interview for UNICEF in the Gambia. And this was before I left.
Okay. So,
exactly.
Yeah.
That was it. So I went forward to Cape Town. I did my interview. And I felt it looked too similar to what I left in New York.
I can see that.
Yeah. I walked into an off branch of Hearst Publication. It looked like Condé Nast. It was still magazine, editorial. I mean, I think it would have been a great. I always wonder what that path would have looked like if I decided to work for O Magazine, because I think Oprah was amazing. But I decided to go for the UNICEF. It was just a 3-month consultancy. It was different from what I was trying to leave behind in New York. And I figured UNICEF really does work in country. And this will also give me a chance to see something beyond the greater Banjul area that I was familiar with, and see a lot of the rural side and have more of a personal depth knowledge of my home country. So I went with UNICEF, and then a 3-month consultancy turned into a career consultancy with the UN amongst private sector.
Oh, wow. So you kind of got a little bit of that bow tie, right?
I did. I did. I kind of got a little bit of that.
Yeah, it was kind of tied up a little bit. So, but I mean, yeah. I mean, your strategy was wonderful. So, I mean, it just proves that, a little bit of organization on the side of using your network makes a huge difference in kind of getting to where you need to be or want to be.
I think you put it exactly in the right way. That's what I tell people who are looking to make the transition. Use your network. Your network is a lot larger than you think it is. Sometimes we take our network for granted, especially us New Yorkers, because we socialize so much that we forget that we have a strong network. So yeah, tap into your network. I think intention is really important. Define what your intention is. You don't have to have the path so much, but once you define your intention and make it a bit clear, and you use your network, then I guess the bow tie comes in a lot clearer. Yeah.
You mentioned that you went away to school and came back. So in terms of your background professionally and the inspiration that, puts you in the space that you currently are, what were some of the factors that have you there?
So I always loved, when I was younger and high school and even elementary school, I always loved gathering information and discovering new information and putting it together and then presenting it to people in a way that was interesting to them and having them unfold and learn.
Storyteller.
And at that time, with my limited knowledge of different kind of career paths and occupations, I just felt, and my African parents felt, that's journalism. And yeah. So I said, yeah, that's what journalism is. So I'm going to be a journalist. My paternal grandfather was a journalist in the Gambia.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So I guess that also kind of made me think that should be my path. So I went to school and I studied journalism. And when I got out, I discovered that I wanted a little bit more creativity than what journalism had taught me. And that's when I went into the magazine world, thinking that it'll be a bit more creative, which it was. And I went into the lifestyle magazine world, which was the travel magazine. And then after that, a food magazine. I always say I'm like a wannabe artist. I have so many artist friends and I appreciate the arts so much. So, that led me there. And then like I said, when I went to Gambia, it led me into development. I am a product of the UN. Both my parents worked for the UN, and that's what made me a New Yorker. And I swore that I would never work for the UN because I felt like I knew too much of it. It didn't seem something that was refreshing because I knew it my whole life. But, that's what led me there.
Yeah, but you flipped it and put it in a whole other context. So that is creative. So I always, I'm not shy about claiming myself as a creative or an artist anymore because I mean, I always have been creative and an artist, but I feel like we run away from embracing that side of ourselves to our own detriment, right? Because of the way people judge artists or people judge, creatives as not being focused or organized necessarily. They just get to be very like free and carefree. But I think that many successful artists are people like us who have intention, think about it, and then they just build their art around a different, I guess, pivot point, if that makes sense.
No, it does. And I think it's also, this high expectation of what I'll say more the creative world and what artistry means, and that if you are an artist that, you better deliver something that's just like amazing and it's going to be featured in a gallery or in a specific show. But there's so many different paths of being a creative. And you're right to claim it. Recently, I read something on, one of these Instagram posts that really resonated with me, and it was like I'm more in all the art that's not being done or shared because people are like are afraid.
The algorithm.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, that too. Oh, yeah, there's two. Yeah. So sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but I just saw one about all the art that doesn't get seen because of the algorithm. And it's so true.
Because of the algorithm. Exactly. Because of the algorithm. And then it went on to say, because, you're afraid to share or you're afraid to express yourself or, you feel like you can't live out of a box. So, yeah. Yeah, I think that's it. Yeah, but I surrounded myself with artists, even if I didn't think that I was, and that's so fulfilling. Yeah,
exactly. I have that same kind of feeling about my tribe, so to speak. So I find that so interesting that your paternal grandfather was a journalist.
He was Charles Whitfield Thomas. He was a journalist in the Gambia.
Okay. And so I just had an interview with James Brunner and he's 94. So just to hear about what he was covering and how, I don't know if you knew him very well, but what he was seeing and writing about in the Gambia at that time, because he was a colonial journalist.
Yeah, I'm sure he knew my grandfather because so was my grandfather. My grandfather was a colonial journalism and I think was really like, these were the guys that gave birth to Pan-Africanism.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly it. So interesting. Okay. So we'll put a note on that. So let's get to why the where. So you started in the Gambia with the UN and now you are in Dakar. So why the where? How did you come to be living, working, and playing where you currently are?
Dakar is a wonderful city. It is a wonderful West African city. It's very cosmopolitan. It's very artsy, and as we know, as we've explained, I really appreciate and adore the arts. I think there are different African cities that definitely are very artsy, but I think for me, Senegal stood out because of its history with the art. You go back to its first independent president, Senghor, that was a poet and an artist. And I think from that time, Senegal has inherited this high value for art and culture, and really, really high value, where a lot of respect is given to creatives, to artists, not just as a sector of society that have like a stagnant status, but where you can have upward mobility and how it integrates into the society completely. So that was very captivating. And Senegal has become a hub for West and Central Africa, So you have, and that's what makes it even more cosmopolitan. That resonates with me as a nomad, as a New Yorker, melting pot person. So, unfortunately, because of like the Civil War in Ivory Coast that happened in the 90s, I think 90s, early 2000s, a lot of the international agencies had their Western and Central Africa regional office in Abidjan. And when the unrest happened for like almost a decade, they moved their offices to Dakar. And what maybe was intended to be a short-term, a temporary situation, turned into a new regional hub. So you have all these, and then you also have a lot of the private sector now. As we know, Africa is hot. Everybody's interested in Africa. Everybody's respecting Africa to some degree, more than before. And you have a lot of the private sector now moving into Africa and having offices in Africa. So you have private sector establishing in Dakar, not just doing country level work, but having their office as a sub-regional for West and Central Africa countries. So that was attractive. As a consultant, it was attractive to be there for work because I knew that my clientele was there, where I could be doing work within the continent, but be based in Dakar. And I knew Senegal was interesting because, it was dynamic when it came to being cosmopolitan and artsy. The culture between indigenous culture between Gambia and Senegal is the same. Before colonialism, Gambia and Senegal was one land. So we speak Wolof and Fulani and all the other traditional languages. Our customs, our foods are the same. So that kind of filled my Gambian culture desire, and the proximity to Gambia was there too. So I'm very lucky that way. You can drive. I mean, the roads and the ferry, make it a little bit longer than it should be if they were, done it in a better way. But yeah, I drive many times. I go by road.
So tell us a little bit more. So you've been in Dakar for how long now?
I've always been, like I said, I'm a nomad. So I've been in and out, especially as a Gambian. I've been in and out of Senegal a lot. But the decision I made, to make Dakar my base was in 2015. I ran to New York. I ran back to New York thinking that I missed New York around 2010, 11. And I found out that all my consultancies were coming out of Senegal to do the work throughout the continent. And I remember I say this a lot to many of my network. One time I remember working 9 months out of the year, and I just figured, okay, I'm not going to be paying New York rent and not be living there for 9 months, and all my work is in Africa. So in 2015, I decided to make Dakar my base, and I'm happy I made that decision.
I visited Dakar for the first time last year for the Biennale, so I can definitely say that I've experienced that artsy, and I can't wait to return to experience more of that artsy Dakar. And so I am curious about what part, like what is your Dakar? I stayed in kind of northern part of the city. I stayed in 3 places. So I stayed by the university.
Okay, Cheikh Anta Diop.
Exactly. And then I stayed by the old airport.
Okay, in Ngor Yoff area.
Yes, Ngor. Yes, exactly. So I'm curious about like what part of Dakar is your home base, like, and what's it like in that community?
Well, Dakar has like little spots of different communities within the greater Dakar area, which is what we're talking about. And, you were in the area in Gore, which is, construction is booming in Dakar. Anybody who passes through Dakar, I think this is the case that I've seen with a lot of cities in West Africa, just like Ghana is booming with the construction. Everywhere you see it in Dakar. And you have the different spots that have like little mini niches of cultures, Go is great. It has a lot of like growing surf community and the surf life, which is really interesting. I currently live in Wakam, which is a great mix of like old urban, and the new developments. They have a military base that's there as well.
Okay. So is that a little bit out of like central Dakar, Wakam?
Yeah, so it's out of central Dakar, as we will call downtown, but it's still part of the greater Dakar area. And and speaking of downtown, yeah, downtown is it's still that downtown feeling where you can walk around and see the bustling and all the colors and the smells.
Yes, exactly. I did a lot of walking too. So speaking of where you are in that place, I want to ask you about Glocal speak. So we want to hear what you hear. And so I ask you to share a word, a phrase, or a saying that is a meaningful part of your local experience and why or how you've come to value it as Glocal speak.
This is a good one. It's a really good question. And this is something that I've known it for a long time because it's in Wolof. And that's what we speak in Gambia. But I've learned to appreciate more and more throughout the years. And it's Jamrek.
Jamrek?
Yeah, which means peace only.
I like that.
Yeah, so normally when you greet, you'll say Nangadef, which I think a lot of people hear. And, you have like the everyday experience now where you say Mangfi, which is I'm here. But, my maternal grandmother used to always say that the correct reply is Jamrek. which is peace only. And you hear Jamrek a lot. So they'll ask you like, how is your mother? How is, I think this is throughout the continent. They like to go through the family members. How's your mother? How's your father? How's the household? How's work? And then that's when you reply, Jamrek, 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 Jamrek. And that's like a very, very common saying that I value more and more and try to live it because I'm trying to limit, like limit the chaos and any noise in my life and like peace only, peace only, peace only.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. And it's so true. I find that there's so much grace in the way that, our indigenous languages are and in the way that people speak that my mother tongue is English. But the more that I'm in Ghana and around the languages and understanding like even the translations that we think are just so inadequate in so many ways. So I can totally Jamrek, peace only.
Jamrek, yes, peace only. Yeah. Another term that I like, it's not a Wolof and it's not an indigenous phrase, but because, like I said, I'm nomad and I go around the world, but I really appreciate it is grow where you're planted.
Ah, that is a great sentiment as well.
Moving around a lot, sometimes I put a lot of things on hold thinking that I would be here temporarily and now's not the time. And then life kind of takes over. And then before you know it, what you thought would be short term ends up being long term. And, a dream or an action gets deferred. So I've learned to really appreciate the grow where you are planted. And if you get replanted somewhere, then you go there.
Yeah, I love that because my name means Florence. Means flower. And so I always just think of blooming. Like it's just bloom is just always in my mind, especially as I've just kind of gotten mature and realized exactly that. Like working on the continent is not always easy. So you got to figure out how to make the soil produce for you in a lot of ways. So
I love that. I love that. And I think you're a good representation of that. Anybody who knows you. It's quite fitting.
Aw, thanks. Thanks. Okay, so let's get into the work, the business. So you're still in this development space, but now you're in Dakar and you're doing a few things. But I'm so curious about your work with the Seed Project. Let's tell us about that, how it happened, how the organization is doing. I listened to you on a radio program and I was just like, oh, what awesome work. So tell us more about Seed.
Oh, thanks so much. Seed is it's an incredible NGO. It's a nonprofit organization. It's a US registered, but its HQ in operations and programming is in Senegal. And its target audience and its deliverables are throughout the continent. It's an NGO that uses sports as a catalyst to empower youth. It's a youth empowerment NGO that believes in education.
Is that what the acronym is?
Exactly. The acronym is Sports for Education and Economic Development, SEED. So it's really believing in education and understanding that sports and education and empowerment go hand in hand. That sports is a great catalyst. Traditionally within the continent, when you played sports, it was on the side or when you were done with your work. Or sometimes, you might be punished as a kid because you were out playing football, or soccer, as anybody might call it, too much. And what I love about Seed is like, no, this is not the case. When you use sports and you use it properly, it can really empower and any individual, but specifically, as you know, we're a young continent. Our youth population is strong. So, what I learned I feel like what I must say, before I continue is I'm really happy with where I am right now because I feel like all my experiences have led me to really benefit the most from what I'm doing right now. And when it comes to Seed, I really value it because in my development consultancy work in Africa, which is what my specialty is development in Africa, is that, like I said, it's a young population. So I really understood the value of even if you're not into the youth, even if that's not where your interest is. If you're into development in Africa, if you're into business in Africa, if you don't focus on the youth, forget it, because that's the majority of the population. So I really love what Seed is doing. It was founded by Amadou Gallo Fall. He's a Senegalese, and he's basically a product of what Seed's mandate is, which is why he started it. He came from a family that really valued education, great at school. And I think it was someone from USAID had seen him and seen how tall he was. And, long story short, introduced him to basketball, connected him with basketball. And he ended up, with his good grades, getting a college scholarship to go to the US and getting his college degree for free while playing college basketball. And, he never really ended up being a player, but he ended up being a really big and significant figure within the basketball industry. And he's the founder of Seed Project, and he founded it because he understood what sports could do for African youth, as it did for him. So that's I do strategic partnerships, global strategic partnerships, to bring in, whether they're financial or in kind, to support the great programming that's happening.
Okay. And so what are some of the partnerships that are helping the organization to grow? And because it's basketball, I feel like I'm sure there are some basketball partnerships that you've worked on cultivating. And
exactly. So Seed is sports for education and economic development, but we're focused on basketball because of, you start with what you know. And Amadou Galafal obviously knows basketball. So we have a partnership. Our primary partnership was with the NBA Academy. So the NBA is huge and has different sectors and departments, but our official primary partnership is with the NBA Academy. And it's the first NBA Academy in Africa that's in Sali, Senegal. And now they're growing throughout the continent. We also have Nike partnerships. Nike's a great supporter when it comes to performance, on-court performance gear. We have local partnerships with like Casamasses, which is the water company. So it's really interesting for me because I really get to tap into, what I love, which is the global community, and bringing, whether it's a high net worth individual, whether it's local Senegalese private sector company, or an Africa-wide business company, or an international one, So I really work to tap in and find strategic partnerships and for resource mobilization.
And I imagine that the Basketball Africa League, is that it?
Yes, the BAL, the Basketball Africa League.
So that is based in Dakar as well, right?
It is. It's based in Dakar. It was started by Amadou Galofal. He was previously in South Africa with NBA Africa. And once he set that up and running beautifully, his new NBA project is the BAL, and he is the president of the Basketball Africa League. And the Seed Project and the Basketball Africa League don't have an official partnership as we do with the NBA Africa Academy, but we collaborate a lot. There's a lot of collaboration. And, if I must humbly say, because Seed is 25 years old? So Seed really set up this ecosystem that we're seeing now. Obviously, the federations were there before, and they're great African basketball players that played in the 70s, way before Seed came to be. But the ecosystem that we're seeing now, the level of basketball and the whole ecosystem, I really do believe Seed had a huge, huge part in this. And we collaborate a lot with the BAL. The BAL staff, there's a lot of BAL staff that are Seed alumni. Because as 25-year-olds, you have high school students that were in Chess, Senegal, that Seed Project is the name of the NGO. And part of the programs is the Seed Academy, which is its most popular program. So it is a basketball academy. It has dorms where the majority of the beneficiaries are economically marginalized youth. They dorm there, they eat there, they go to a public school that's nearby, but within the academy, they have tutoring, one-on-one tutoring, group tutoring, ESL classes, preparation for testing, life skills on and off the court, key values is given to them. So you have a lot of kids that were Seed high school students in the academy because it's 25-year-olds, and some of them got scholarships to get a US education. Some of them got scholarships to continue in Senegal that are non-sports, and the large majority of them, I think our stats are about 96 or 98% of Seed kids have university degrees or are working and bringing in jobs and income. And a lot of them work within the NBA, the Basketball Africa League included.
That's awesome. That is Economic development in action.
It is. It is. I'm happy to play a small part in that.
Yeah, yeah, I love it. Just speaking about sports and that focus, how would you say that Seed has been effective bringing in women? Because particularly like thinking about the context of being in your region, which is a very Muslim, there's a lot of Muslim influence. And so how does that kind of play into, and I only bring that up because gender roles are very, pretty defined, and, women aren't necessarily seen as being those athletes or being, sports people. So how has that kind of played out in recruiting young women, young girls to be part of the program, and then how successful they may be?
No, I mean, it's a really good point. And this is another pride and joy that I'm happy to be a little bit part of this history is that, you're completely right. The sports in general, globally, young girls, young women, professional athletes, they're not, the equality is not there. They're marginalized. They've been historically marginalized when it comes to being integrated into sports all over the world. Some part of the Western world, we're seeing a little bit more advancement than on the continent. But with Seed, this year, 2023, marks the 10-year anniversary where Seed Academy became girls inclusive. So the academy started off as an all boys academy, and 10 years ago, the the funds were pushed to magic was pushed to happen. There were a lot of roadblocks. I wasn't part of it 10 years ago, obviously, because I've been part of Seed for 3 years now. But I do know that there were a lot of roadblocks, when it came to why girls. It's an NGO, the funds are already limited. The programming was already set, but Amadou Gallo Fall really got a lot of requests from young girls in the community to say, we love this and we want to be a part of it. And what I love about him is that he listened and he told his team, he didn't want to hear no, and he didn't want to hear that we can't. It needed to happen, and it happened. So 10 years ago, Seed Academy in 2013 became girls inclusive. And we're just seeing the results. You have one Seed girl, Fatou Jang. She's been in California. She's played college basketball in California, got her bachelor's degree. I think this year she's finishing up her master's. She's into HR and HR management. She's registered an NGO, giving back to her community in chess. So when it comes to what they call the Taliban, who are street children. So, we have so many stories like this where you see what the impact is for boys and for girls when they use sports, when the values of sports are used and in a productive way. They get this discipline, they get this value system, and they have this go-get-it resilience. And that translates, off the court. And you see it, and you see the values about giving back and communication, and what was coined by an NBA Africa staff, Kita, the Ubuntu theory, which I think almost every African language has, which is unity. You see the kids. It's good. You see these young kids grow when they're in high school, as they're teenagers, and as adults, and they come back to Senegal. They set up the industries, or they work, and the girls are part of it.
Yeah, that's wonderful. So I think this is a kind of a great point for me to ask you about a mindset hack. And so I want to ask you, what is your favorite or an innovative mindset hack? Now, this is one that you can imagine, or one that you know of, or one that you practice.
A mindset hack. I think it's basically what I said in the beginning that I go back to. We started this conversation, which is like clear intention. Go back to when you want something, and go back to what your intention is. What is your intention? What is your intention? And tap into your network. And that works cross board. Another one that I learned, during my years working in communication for UNICEF when I was in Gambia, is, the one-on-one for UNICEF is issue, action, impact, and that's a great mind hack I use. It was initially used for writing, but I found it useful for everything in life. That, whatever I'm doing, personally or professionally, I try to go back to be like, okay, what's the issue here? What's the action that I'm taking? Where are the gaps? What's strong? And what's the impact? And is that in alignment with what my intention is? I always circle back to that.
Mm-hmm. I like that. Issue, action, impact. and being intentional and reflecting on that intention and reviewing those intentions as well. So let's talk about the curator in you.
The curator in me. I feel like I've always been one, but I've, like you said, gotten the courage to label it that way. So, since I was young, I've like I said, I've always loved to gather stuff, gather information, and put it together and present it in a way that was compelling and interesting. Early on, I thought that was journalism, right? And it took me on the path of journalism that led me to great opportunities and experiences and work. With my strong network of artist friends, and also just even though I worked in communication, working for the travel magazine and food magazine, and then with my art networks, I would always be asked to help them with their comms, oh, I have an interview coming up, or I have a brand, or whether I'm a singer or, a visual artist, I would help them. And then about 5 years ago, I realized that it could all merge. I could use my communication and advocacy skills and my love for art and gathering and putting together information to present it to people. So this is where the curator of experiences for brands comes. I in communication now, things have evolved, and everything is the experience. That is for me what I believe is what great communication is. Yes, you can do the press release. Yes, you can do the billboards. Yes, you can do the leaflets. Everybody can do that now. I think that's an archaic way of doing stuff. It's still needed, I think, as a backbone. But the real way for me for impact is to create experiences. The storytelling is having people experience the story. So that works for brands and institutions cross board. If it's in development and you really want people to know about the demographic dividends in Africa of young people and how they need to be empowered, you create an experience for the donors and the partners to really experience what it's like. Better than writing. The report is always there as the Bible, as the factual information. But if you have a donor trip coming and you really curate a proper experience for them to see the youth and to see how they're thriving, to see where the gaps are, you're going to really have them understand what's going on. You're going to touch them and they're going to remember it and they're going to feel a connection and they're going to have a stronger commitment to deliver. And that also translates into the arts. It translates into sports. It translates into arts. It translates into everything. This is what I do. I create experiences for institutions and brands. And as of late, with my experience with Seed, I realized, I do global partnerships. But aside from partnerships, there's this, I don't know if you realize, but the NBA All-Star game this year was Africa Forward. Even the drafting that happened 2 weeks ago, Africa Forward, front and center. You had Thames, Burna Boy performing at the NBA All-Star game, and they were the talk of the town, not by Africans, but by the world. And you have a lot of now basketball, all ecosystems of the basketball industry coming in, of the sports industry coming in. And I'm working with my partner and delivering experiences in the sports sector here in Africa. So it's an expert service provider in the sports industry in Africa. So helping to provide also aspects of sports experiences in the continent.
As an athlete myself, right? I college athlete and did some running after.
Oh, great. I didn't know that.
Yeah. So everything you're saying about the sports, it is the soundtrack of my life, right? Because I was in sports and all of the things about discipline and, being organized. And it just really, it's a game changer, I think, for many people. And not everyone has an athletic aptitude. So I won't say that it's for everyone, but those that find that aptitude, it's truly a path for, I guess, just a great life purposing, so to speak. When you say sports in Africa, and I always, I feel like a stepchild because I was a track athlete and it's always football, football, football. So I'm so happy, number one, that Senegal has basketball as a key feature. And, it's growing across the region, across the continent, exactly. But what are some of the other types of sports that are kind of being featured, being focused on, being grown?
Well, obviously we know football. Also, we know football, which is soccer. which Senegal has been doing exceptionally well. And, we have like Sadio Mane and the coach of the team as well, that are really, the game was already the most popular game, in Senegal as it is in Africa, but there's a new sense of pride and a new sense of economic opportunity and ecosystems that are being formed, translating into sports tourism and arts and music. But, you also have traditional sports, which is a traditional wrestling, which is all male, but a very, very traditional. I'm not working on that, but that's definitely there. You have some volleyball that's here as well, but the real dominant one, as we all know, is football. It's European football, as we say it in Europe and around the world, except for the States. And for me, what's really interesting is the emerging basketball. And I say basketball because of the ecosystem that's being created by it, the ecosystem of reviving and from sports coming up, it's reviving, I think, football as well. And the whole sports industry in general. And that's really where my work lies, not necessarily in the technicality of the sports, but in the ecosystem. So, with sports, we have fashion, we have gear. With sports, we have music. They go hand in hand. With sports, we have tourism, we have sites that we see. And there are all these experiences that we're curating over here, with my partner throughout the continent, using sports for that.
I love how you just kind of framed what the ecosystem is about, in that space. You have the music, you have the fashion, you have the tourism. I would add education. I would add health, so I think it's a great way to put all of that into the mindsets of people to feel that flexibility to move between them and also engage stakeholders in all of those places as you grow.
Beautifully said. That's it, is to engage stakeholders for that. And, really for me, I really feel like what I do well, I can say confident right now, is creating strategic synergies in Africa to deliver experiences, and that have a cultural reference. And that's exactly what you're saying. It's exactly that. And I feel like all roads that we were speaking of, from my time studying journalism to, working in Condé Nast with tourism and, travel and food, working for UNICEF, community youth engagements, doing, learning more about the sports world through SEED, and now bringing in all those different sections that you talked about. The development sectors, that is my specialty, which is, education and economic development, to the arts section, which is the fashion, which is the food, and which is the culture, and which is the arts, and to tourism. That all comes together. That's what I do, is creating those strategic synergies in Africa to deliver that cultural experience that hits those areas. Yeah. And that's exciting for me.
Yeah, I was going to say, what fun you're having, because it just sounds like fun.
Yeah, it's a lot of work. We're still on the continent. There are lots of challenges.
Of course. I know.
It's fun. It's exciting. You know how it is. There's lots of dots and little dots in between the dots. But for me, it's all worth it because I find it exciting. And I think it's exciting for the continent. I think it gives great opportunity to a lot of Africans in Africa that are starting to do great and beautiful things, and then it can give them a platform to emerge and thrive.
Yeah, and I think that's the story of the youth. When you were speaking about the youth, they're just cut differently. They're not the us's. So this, like being very, as your craft is strategic about how to engage them, how to make them or bring them into the fold of becoming the leaders and those that are going to be the primary focus of, the next generations. It's very important. Yeah. So let's talk about the Begay that is not working. I mean, because of what you do, you probably mix a lot of social, but I'm always interested in finding out who you are when you're not working. So I ask, are you a reader? Are you a watcher? Are you a listener? And what are some of your favorite reads, watches, or listens?
I'm so embarrassed to say I'm becoming less and less of a reader. And I think I'm just getting sucked into what modern day is. I feel like I read a lot for my work. I read a lot of reports, I do a lot of research. So I'm finding myself less and less doing leisure reading, unfortunately. The New Yorker in me was really someone that would be reading on the subway in transit. So this is something that I don't have really in Senegal, because you're really more in a taxi. There's no subway ride or a long bus ride that you're doing. So I'm reading less, but I want to change that. I listen to a lot of podcasts. What am I listening to for podcasts? There's a good podcast that I think it's called Live Better, Live More. Dr. Rajan Chatterjee. I love listening to that. He's a doctor of Indian heritage that's based in the UK. And he really he does amazing interviews. I love his style. And he brings in different characters that really talk about living better and living longer. And that helps me a lot. What am I listening to? I'm all over the map when it comes to music. I'm all over the map, yeah. But a lot lately, I've been listening to a lot of Amapiano, like everybody else. It wakes me up. I love it. It wakes up my body. Yeah, I love listening to it in the morning or even in the evening. Robert Glasper as a New Yorker, that kind of, I know you love America. Yeah, I just love him.
I just saw him in the park with Layla Hathaway and Bilal, last weekend, 2 weekends ago.
I miss New York in the summertime. Yeah, there's nothing like New York in the summertime.
Yeah, I know. That's why I'm here. When I was there, I was listening to radio and hearing local artists. So are there any local artists that you listen to? Because the music was it's so different, the Ghanaian local artists versus even Nigerian local artists. But are there any that are, I saw some, I was like, wow, this is good music. So
yeah, there's what we have in Senegal, which is the same as in Gambia, is we call them balach music. I guess everybody would know balach by Youssou N'Dour, who's I guess the most famous. So we have that kind of music that's here. Yeah, there's so many young artists that are coming out. I know the songs, but I can't keep track of them.
Right, so many. I know what you mean. I know.
I'm still old school with my
exactly
with my area. But you have these Jiao Jope, that the kids listen to. That I love listening to it. When I'm around crowds, he's like the rave now with the witty song and stuff like that.
Great. We have some show note info for you folks, so you can look at different music and podcasts and all that good stuff. Begay, this has been so lovely. Thank you so much for taking time and just for what you're doing, because I like to just kind of celebrate the impacts that folks are making and just the courage to even go back and be who you want to be and who you are. So thank you so much for that. So before we let you go, do you have any last thoughts that you'd like to share with the audience?
Well, first and foremost, thank you. Well, lastly, not first and foremost, but lastly, I want to thank you again for having me on. I think what you're doing is amazing. I think it's great to hear stories, throughout the diaspora, different perspectives. I love that you are contributing to breaking down this false perception of having one African story. So I really value that, and I look forward to your other episodes. It was a pleasure to talk to you. Last words to share is, let's connect, guys. Let's connect, Let's synergy. Let's tap into each of our networks, and we can all grow together. It's not a competition, and that's it. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. We can all grow together. It's not a competition. Yes, thank you for that, because we need to hear that more often. All right, folks, this has been another episode of the podcast. You can catch us Tuesdays with new episodes at glocalcitizenspod.com or wherever you get your podcasts. Leave us a review. That helps other people find great content on the internet. So until next time, bye for now.